here just to bring a coffee. You can hear me?
I do. feel like a movie star. So, good evening. I will start in English. This event is in English, but before I give a very short welcome speech, ich möchte Sie auch zuerst auf Deutsch herzlich willkommen heißen im Namen der Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung und schön, dass Sie an diesem wunderschönen Ort hier sind, eine sicherlich sehr spannende Diskussion zu verfolgen. So, dear panelists, dear audience, dear visitors of the fifth festival, here at this very beautiful venue of the Ute Konnewitz in Leipzig and all around the world, we are also live streaming this event. I would like to greet you on behalf of the Federal Agency for Civic Education, and I would like to warmly welcome you to the third station and fourth event in the series of Weaving Peace, 30 years of experience from Southeast Europe. That's the title of our series of events. Tonight's event takes place here in Leipzig as part of the festival Politik im Freien Theater. Before we begin with the program, which we are all looking very forward to, I would like to briefly outline the idea behind this project. Together with Alida Bremer, an expert on Southeast European literature and culture, we have curated this series to reflect the many equal voices and sources that sustain peace in the region of Southeast Europe. Visiting thematically related festivals and engaging in dialogue with their audiences, who each in their own way help to keep the region's living experience and memory alive. 30 years after the genocide in Srebrenica, the Dayton Agreement and Operation Storm, just to name a few of the events from 1995, 30 years ago, the societies of the successor states of Yugoslavia are still entangled in cycles of repetitive nationalistic discourses and their many, many consequences. However, reconciliation and lasting peace remain fragile. And yet, despite deep emotional scars and ongoing structural challenges, the region demonstrates remarkable social and cultural resilience, sustaining peace through creative and civic effort. And to highlight these achievements, we initiated Weaving Peace to explore 30 years of peace-building experiences through various lenses. So we have already made one station at the music festival in Rudolstadt. Last weekend we were in Frankfurt am Main talking about media, literature and journalism regarding the peace building in the region. And tonight we are in Leipzig talking about theater and peace building in the region. We warmly invite you to visit all these different stations. In 2 weeks we are also in Cottbus at the film festival in Cottbus, and at the end of November we are visiting Peace Weeks in Münster. For sure, it won't be able to visit all of the stations, but you can follow the documentation of these stations on our website of the Federal Agency for Civic Education. Tonight, we place a special focus on the political dimension of theater, or as Hannah Arendt might put it, the political art par excellence. And I also invite you to rediscover the enduring passion for theater that connects all people and generations across Southeast Europe, a true transnational thread in shared cultural space. And I'm really delighted and very proud that we were able to gather tonight the greatest theater experts from different countries of the region. And I'm also personally very excited to enjoy this evening listening to all of you. So at this very last part of my speech, I would like to thank most of all to the location, to Almut Wagner, who supported our idea to make this event here, but also to all staff, technicians, or people who are supporting us tonight. I would also like to thank to my colleagues who organized the PIFT festival, who also enabled us to be one part of the festival. And the most, I would like to thank the colleagues of our team, Christina Menke, Konstanze Söder, Hanna Jetinec, and Prisesha Saliki, who were working for many months to make this series of events makeable. So special thanks also to Irma Markolin, the artist who created the project's visual identity through her line cuts of bridges from former Yugoslavia. Here you see it, it's like a plot, but indeed it's one bridge, one of the bridges she designed for the event, transforming them into a poetic part of the weaving pattern. Finally, I would like to invite and introduce our host. It's not me, it's Anna Vujanovic, one of the leading theater scholars of the region and an expert in culture and political theory. Thank you for coming, Anna, and for overtaking these two discussions. So Anna Vujanovic is a cultural worker. She's a researcher, dramaturg, writer, and lecturer. Her work focuses on bringing together critical theory and contemporary art while exploring feminist storytelling, ecofeminism, and resistance to fascism. She has taught at various universities in Amsterdam and Berlin, and she was a member of the Walking Theory, a very important theoretical artistic platform in the region with a seat in Belgrade. And she moves fluently between theory and practice, and I'm very happy that you're going to also take us through this evening, moving also through theory and practice of theater in the Southeastern Europe. So I would introduce Anna to come to the stage, and I wish you a beautiful evening.
So thank you, Katarina, for this invitation, and also BPB for organizing this event. We are supposed to be many, as you can see on the screen, so it's just the illusion that I'm alone here on stage. So this is how it looks like, but there are many people around and many ghosts. So just to introduce a little bit the program tonight, I would just like to say that in the context that Katarina has just outlined, when we talk about theater and the performing arts, we usually picture something very alive and entangled, like artists, audiences, and the wider social political world meeting in the real time. And that meeting happens in those shared spaces of co-presence, where we don't just watch a show, we co-create an experience. And by doing so, we also project an imaginary of a larger community. And that's why there is so much hope invested in theater, dance, and performances, live arts with political force. They actually feel very close to politics because both are built on people gathering in public. This hope has been so strong that Hannah Arendt wrote in her book Between Past and the Future about the political potential of theater, and I will quote from this old book. She said that in the performing arts, the accomplishment lies in the performance itself, and performers need an audience just as acting or political people need the presence of others before whom they appear. Both need a publicly organized space, and both depend upon others for the performance itself. So in short, no audience, no theater, no public, no politics. But I want to add a wrinkle here. After witnessing and participating in many political performances from Belgrade in the 90s to today's European scenes, I've also come to see a gap that we sometimes overlook between performance and politics. And I don't want to speak here about the political power inherent to the theater itself, or to question that power, or to question about how effective theater is, or to criticize us for not having big audience and so on. Actually, I think that if we want to understand how liveness, being together, being with, and togetherness take hold in a social context, and how the imaginaries of performance can radiate outward, we have to turn the question back onto society itself. And my question is simple. How democratic is our democracy indeed? How much do gathered citizens actually decide how they want to live together? Because that's, after all, a basic premise of a democratic society. I don't have an answer to that question. It follows me, it haunts me. But with that polemical framework in mind, I would like us to open up the landscape of theater and performance in former Yugoslavia, to look at how artists and cultural workers responded to deep social crisis and war, and crucially, according to Katarina's proposal, how their work helped to re-establish peace in the 90s and afterwards. Practically speaking, today's program has two parts. The first part is entitled Theater in Ex-Yugoslavia, Between War, Activism and Escape, Mapping the Landscape. And I imagine it more as a kind of overview, cultural, political overview of the tendencies, phenomena, problems, questions, and so on. And then second part is entitled Practices of Peace and Coexistence, 4 works, where we will actually highlight 4 artistic and cultural practices that have contributed to re-establishing the peace and reconciliation in the region in the past 3 decades. And we will end each block with a short Q&A, so I will try really to be strict with keeping the track of time, because our speakers are all amazing and very eloquent, so I think someone needs to keep the track of time. And then we will have a short break, like 15 minutes for a little refreshment there. So briefly to introduce the speakers in the first block, somewhere behind this screen is Milena Dragicevic-Šešić, who will be our first speaker in the first block, a professor emerita, who stands where art and civic courage meet. In the 90s, within Serbia's anti-Milosevic democratic opposition, Milena worked through civil society to link cultural analysis with concrete action. This is not Milena, but soon you will see Milena. She has always insisted on theater's role in social crisis and on art as activism and public ethics. As a leading scholar, practitioner, both of cultural policy and participation, she has supported initiatives like Center for Cultural Decontamination and the B92 Fund in Belgrade, guiding artists and institutions in conflict and post-conflict contexts. Speaking about her institutional achievements and positions, she later served as the rector of the University of Arts in Belgrade after the democratic overturn in 2000, and founded the UNESCO chair in interculturality, arts management, and cultural management and mediation. Milena has also advised various institutions such as the European Cultural Foundation, Council of Europe, UNESCO, Pro Helvetia, and the British Council. And believe it or not, she is the author of 15 books and over 150 essays. Our next speaker, who we see next to Milena, is Nihat Kreševljaković, curator, cultural worker, and filmmaker from Sarajevo, whose work is inseparable from the city's recent history. So having lived through the siege of Sarajevo, Nihat studied history and since 1994 has been part of the International Theatre Festival MES, becoming its director in 2004. He also leads the Sarajevo War Theatre, SARTER, known for confronting the legacies of conflict on stage. With his twin brother, he co-founded a video archive now a vital repository preserving more than 1,000 hours of footage from the siege. Nihad also co-authored the documentary Do You Remember Sarajevo and scripted for film. In recognition for his cultural leadership and memory work, he received the 2019 Kairos Prize for European Cultural Achievement. And the third speaker, who is supposed to sit here, and I hope that he will soon, he is coming. So I'm not lying. There are many people around me in different shapes. Hello, Janez. The third speaker in the first block is Jeton Neziraj, theater director, performance artist, and cultural researcher, whose work sits where politics, art, and everyday life meet. Trained in sociology and theater directing and in performance theory, Janez is known for his conceptually daring project, most famously the 2007 performative name change he undertook with other two colleagues from Ljubljana, adopting the name of Slovenia's then Prime Minister to probe identity, authorship, and power. So Janez was actually not born under that name. He can maybe later reveal that name if that's still relevant for his practice. So he also led the Maska Institute in Ljubljana for over 2 decades, edited the magazine for performing arts Maska, one of the most influential magazines in our region still, and has collaborated with international artists, mostly as performer, with like Meg Stewart, Boris Shermatz, and Isto Kovac. A frequent visiting professor across Europe, since 2020, Janez has headed the MA in solo dance authorship at HCT UDK Berlin. His practice insists that artistic action and political imagination are inseparable. So let's begin now. My desired order is that we will first hear Milena, and then Nihad, and then Janez. And the first block, if we want to keep 10 minutes for Q&As, should finish at 5. Also, we have some other reasons for that, finish at 5. So basically, I would like you to give us a count of the theater landscapes in your countries, maybe 5 to 7 minutes, so that we still have some time for discussion among you and ourselves here on stage. So Milena, I would invite you. I will sometimes need to keep the track of time. I need to repeat that. I know that it's not a very popular part of this duty, but yeah. So Milena, the floor is yours.
To help me to be quicker on the track, I will share the screen with you. I hope it will work. One moment. Because how can I say, the situation in the theater field at the beginning of 90s, I would say it was extremely complex. Why? Because in the country that was in dissolution, that was, how to say, with a raised level of nationalism, populism, with the disrespect of political elites, while at the same time we happened to the greatest historical event of the fall of the Iron Curtain as observers. Some other curtains have been raised within Yugoslavia, and that started already in 80s. It was not, how to say, culture was not immune of the rise of nationalism and populism in media. We celebrated freedom of media, but media brought also a lot of hatred speech and was one of the major, I would say, not direct but indirect cause of such hatred which provoked such war crimes also. What did theater field? Or on one side try to ignore what is happening somewhere else, in provinces, in the fields, etc. They were preoccupied with their own research projects and so on one side. But on the other, what we can see was so-called nationalization of repertories. What that meant in Serbian context was visible on the destiny of Belgrade Drama Theater, at that moment led by artistic director Borko Pavicevic, who wanted to reintroduce Yugoslavian authors from Slovenia, from Croatia, key authors that like Krleža and Cankar, but the ensemble rejected that. The ensemble insisted, and that was multicultural ensemble, the most multicultural theater ensemble in Belgrade in that moment. I wouldn't cite the names, but you could see there were Hungarians, Croatians, Bosnians, etc., from everywhere. One by one, they were starting leaving theater under certain kind of pressure that was not physical, that was not direct, but indirect. But still, somehow, it was not publicly known by larger audiences. So public theater's role during 90s, during even 80s, and especially during 90s, was the escapist role of someone who is not there, who don't deal with context. The real response came from civil society and artists. First, individual artists, because there was no platforms, public platforms, there were no spaces where you could perform. Thus, for example, Milica Tomic, visual artist, but also performer, and here is an insert of video still of her performance. I am Milica Tomic, words spoken in 80 different world languages, while her body is becoming more and more bloody. And this performance was done before, for example, Amin Malouf was had been written his book, Killing Identities. But this was exactly about it. So artistic project, they really started only coming from independent scenes, have been challenging war, have been bringing the voice of peace, have been discussing these frontiers, have been discussing also migrations and so on. Because the situation or how severe it's going to be, we could witness when the Zenica Theater came to Belgrade in a vain attempt to present performance devoted to Serbian Patriarch, founder of Serbian Orthodox Church, Saint Sava. Although you might consider this performance as something that validates Serbianhood, no, by Serbian nationalists it was, and they organized themselves as a mob. They entered in the theater and they stopped the performance. And it's filmed, and you can see it on YouTube, the voice on the video documentary of that moment when Borka Pavicevic, one of greatest dramaturg in the Serbian Yugoslavian theater, was saying, now you occupy the theater, tomorrow it's going to be concentration camps around and on. But there were a lot of NGOs, civil society, UIDI, Belgrade Circle, Women in Black, different civil initiatives and specifically peace movements, which, for example, organized on the 31st May 1992, a huge, they say like 14 kilometers long, this procession carrying black ribbon for Sarajevo in effort to demand, to request that war in Sarajevo, attack on the city of Sarajevo, should stop. But there was no one, nor in the political sphere, nor in media, not even internationally, that would present. That was the moment when also started 3 months long student protest in 1992 to stop war in Bosnia. No one ever anywhere informed about it, because that would be too. So what the artists did, many of them went to exile. Here we see one of her famous actresses, Sonja Savic, that is doing somewhere in Brussels or whenever she gathered, and with other artists from Croatia, and so on, different sorts of performances calling themselves migrative arts. And at that same time, only student cultural centers in Serbia have been free to discuss, but not for a long time. End of 92, it's going to re-etatize all the public cultural institutions, so even cultural centers, student cultural centers lost their freedom. But you see that was May 1992 when student cultural centers gather artists and intellectuals to speak about their Bosnia, what they took to create museum of traces in Bosnia and Serbian apartments and so on, of love to this country, which is in that very moment try to be distorted and so on, to speak, or in the Student Cultural Center New Belgrade, to speak about subcultures of war. This is one picture also famous of Goranka Matic, famous photo artist, of Exodus of theater, greatest theater actress, Mira Furlan, for whom there was no more place anymore, nor Zagreb, nor Belgrade would like to see her in any performance, because in Zagreb she would be just, I'm not going to use bad words, but traitor for Serbia, but in Belgrade she would still be just a Croatian artist, and then who cares? So they went out. What was the repertory? Classics, Molière, Shakespeare, anything and everything, Serbian classics, nothing contemporary till 95. And for the first time, Yugoslav Drama Theater, with the support of Soros Foundation, they have to say that without money from abroad, this voice of dissent wouldn't be even possible. With some money coming from abroad, it was possible to make performances and so on. So they had enough money to invite Macedonian director and so on to make big, important performances for peace. But that was exception. The rule was evasive comedies or classics and so on. But civil society have also strategies to establish dialogue, and there was different phases. First, as I said at the beginning, individual projects. I wanted to say, but I forgot, Milica Tomic even lended her house, in fact, her father's house, for artistic projects, so that people can gather somewhere, exhibit somewhere, and so on. Then later, when Rex and Center for Cultural Decontamination spaces, and throughout Yugoslavia, other spaces have been formed for free possibility, the artists start gathering around them, and then research was possible, and more, I would say, performing can be facing audience not only on the street, which means incidental audience, but in these buildings, it can be a real gathering in between civil society, people that would like to do something, and where theater would stood with their voice to express. Later, it comes a new generation that started involving social theory and art activism in projects like Nomad Dance Academy, or we had theory, walking theory that Anna Vujanovic belonged, and so on. And especially to develop later transdisciplinary collaborative projects of different art collectives coming from different edges of our Balkan regions, such as Shadow Casters in Zagreb, Context Collective in Belgrade. So time, what you see here are performances of artists in the market. In this very case, it's a microbe wearing its mask and group of Shkart delivering their poetry on these small cartoons and on the markets, because that was the only public space that haven't been controlled in advance what's going to happen, because no one expected art, and definitely not subversive art, to happen. And to finish, because I assume I have to finish now, these are several models of theater activism in independent sector during 90s, and I would underline this research model, artistic research done with and for communities, led by Dach Theater, for example, but not only them. There was quite a lot of theater and dance troupes that would try to apply this model, or interdisciplinary action project involving scientific researchers and artists, such as attempts of reassociation, the project that linked really scientists that research DNA of the victims, for example, of Srebrenica, and trying to establish the identity of victims and so on, or re-entry in the political performance. This was led by Center for Cultural Decontamination and Theater work of Anna Miljanic, while Ivana Vujic in her theater performative work brought utopian visions, performances that tried to to open some new horizons through festivities that she organized, like Engineless Airplane or Dream of Flying and so on. Most were site-specific performing arts interventions, specifically done on so-called no places, on some non-lieu spaces that were just without specific character, or they were withdrawn to the sphere of private apartments or private clubs or feminist circles, or even that far as psychiatric hospital Laza Lazarevic, which Zorica Jevremovic throughout the 90s used not only for her space of theater work, but also as a paradigm of the society as such. The Serbia as a madhouse, as a closed madhouse that you cannot, because she tried with the actors, with the patients of the hospital, to go out on the street. And there was a rehearsal, general rehearsal, but then the director of the hospital was so scared that he never allowed that the real performance will happen. And finally, a new aesthetics where ethics was prevailing in different projects of Sonja Vukicevic, for example, whether it were dance projects or theatrical project and so on. So, of course, it can be said a lot. You can see some of the shots of the, for example, a performance in the bus that Center for Cultural Decontamination organized, or the first Belgrade barricade that wanted to fight against those barricades in Sarajevo. This is Zorica Jevremovic with her actors. And to finish with the most brave acts of theatrical courage, and why I said ethics is prevailing aesthetics, is the work of Dak Theater, devoted, and Zlatko Pakovic later, devoted to memory on Srebrenica. Because what we can say is that we are living in society without culture of memory, where the main strategy of political communication is strategy of oblivion, and that everything what was has to be forgotten. What we done, we, Serbian people or Serbian regime or Serbian police or Serbian army, done wrongly, has to be forgotten, never mentioned, and so on. So, and different forms of this dominant culture of forgetting has been applied, while artists are the only one who takes responsibility to care about memory. But you can see that they are supported by NGOs, but that means there are not many audiences. The very moment that an incidental audience passes by, read, for example, transparent, that oblivion and silence are also crime as the crime itself, they run away. The word Srebrenica is still forbidden word, and no one wants to be reminded. So these are people that using different, it's not only about Srebrenica, this is also about their friends, colleagues, great artists such as Julia Kniffer. So on the day after, 3 days after his death, the artist of Belgrade created Meander in his memory. And of course, throughout the region, we have different acts of memorization. And I'm going, this is my last slide, that, for example, in Sarajevo, also artists are those that are fighting for different culture of memory, culture that remembers and tries not to hide those things that do not suit present political regimes. Thank you. Sorry if I was too long.
Thank you, Milena. This was, of course, amazing account. Now I think we can just go on with Nihad's input and then from Janez. And I would just invite you to try not to be too extensive so that we can have at least 2 questions from the audience. So because also Milena needs to leave. I think it's 5 sharp, right?
5:10, 5:15.
Okay, let's then see how it proceeds, but let's aim at finishing this block at 5. And then so that we can have a little time for discussion. Thank you, Milena. And now we can see Nihad.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Shall we show this first clip, yes, just as the introduction?
Yes.
Drugarice i drugovi, poštovani i dragi gosti. 21. festival malih i eksperimentalnih scena Jugoslavije neposredno pred nama nudi nam svoj program biran pažljivo i stručno, odgovorno i demokratski. Program pokrenut i usklađen sa idejama imanentnim malim i eksperimentalnim teatrima. Revolucionarne ideje, revolucionarni tekstovi proizašli iz anti-burg teatarskog stremljenja izbacuju automatski na vidjelo aktuelnu problematiku našeg svakodnevlja. Prožimanje života i teatra neposredno reagirajućeg na sve što prolazi kroz nas i kraj nas, nudi katkada rješenja koja ne moraju biti do kraja prihvatljiva, no to uostalom nije sudbinski važno. Važna je revolucionarnost, važna je hrabrost da se izađe ispod toplog i u meškoljenju lagodnog pokrivača institucije, da se i hazardira ako treba, da se do krajnjih konsekvenca nudi nešto drugo. U prezentaciji dostignuća svih naših republika i pokrajina, festival se dokazao i opravdao. Postoje potreba našeg društva, snažan element našeg zajedništva i naše demokratičnosti. Značajni uspjesi i nagrade takozvanih malih i mladih teatarskih sredina potvrđuju na djelu ispravnost naše političke orijentacije prema decentralizaciji kulturnih htjenja i ostvarenja i dokazuju da je festival tu orijentaciju provodio u praksi. Otvarajući u ime društveno-političkih organa i organizacija Socijalističke Republike Bosne i Hercegovine ovaj 21. po redu festival malih eksperimentalnih scena Jugoslavije, želim svim učesnicima pun uspjeh, želim da njihove poruke naiđu na odaziv, da razbuktaju diskusije i one javne i one u nama samima. Želim da ono što ćemo ovih dana doživljavati bude podsticaj, da se i dalje traži, da se i dalje otkriva novo i oplemenjuje već postojeće i da se u tim traženjima nikako ne posustane.
I can talk, yeah?
Yes.
So basically, this clip that you saw is the opening of the International Theatre Festival Mess that I'm today's director in 81st, and I just wish to use this as an introduction to like the story about an memory of the space which used to be together and in which theater had its extremely important role. As you heard here, all those things that Theodor Romanč is the guy who is talks about, mentioning all these things like democratically, carefully, responsibly chosen program, promoting small and experimental stages, to risk and to provide new views, like even mentioning unity as important aspect of the theater of that time. On the one side, I just wish to make that closer to younger audience, like the position of the theater in ex-Yugoslavia. And for example, I will mention that the theater that I am director today that it was founded in 1960. So we had this period of the 60s, which was important in Yugoslavia, with all these new tendencies. I'm talking Bosnia, but it's like the parallel event. We have founding the Bitter Festival in Belgrade, Atelier 2012. In Sarajevo, we have a chamber theater in 55 small scenes. We have a small festival of small and experimental stages as a project founded in the 60s, which was just 15 years after the Second World War. And I'm always trying to imagine how it was to those people, you know, like to explain to politicians who hardly understand anything even today, why it's important to have something which is, as we heard, was based very much on the ideas of anti-Burg theater and all those characteristics of anti-Burg theater at that time. Generally, the Yugoslavia during the 80s was a space which promoted, you know, like inside of the theater, which promoted very interesting, very modern, contemporary theatrical tendencies. The interesting thing that 90s basically changing this situation a lot. As Milena already mentioned, she mentioned the performance Saint Sava, which was one of the events which was used to be shown as example when the vision inside of that common cultural space happened, because from that moment those nationalistic tendencies are becoming the mainstream. I wouldn't say just among the politicians, but also among the people and among the people among the theatrical works. From that period, from the 90s, we will have a different paths that theaters from the ex-Yugoslavian countries went. So for me, it was interesting while Milena was talking about the theatrical scene in Serbia in the 90s, mentioning how she called it classicization, like the classical repertoire that was, you know, like kind of that she was using as the one of the forms to escape the reality, which was a reality of aggression, the reality of genocides, reality of mass murdering, the reality of the concentration camps, of the mass graves. Same thing happened in Bosnia, but meaning of this thing is totally different. So the fact that during the siege of Sarajevo, we had 57 theater premieres, which is even more than we have today in 4 years in Sarajevo during the 4 years in 4 theaters that we have. Those 57 premieres, the most amazing thing when I talk about it is the fact that most of those texts were classical texts. So in Sarajevo case, having the classic texts, so also they were Molière, they were Godot, they were Beckett, they were Shakespeare, they were I don't know, Sophocles, they were Ionesco, Miller. In our case, that was the way how to remain normal, how to protect our own humanity, because for understanding what happened in Sarajevo during this period is very important to be aware of the context. The context was the longest siege in the contemporary history, in which people were faced on daily basis with the killings, with the shelling, with the sniper shooting. And when I say that, I would say that for example, we in Sarajevo have empirical proof about the meaning of theater or the meaning of the art in general, that art is the basic human need in the same sense as it is water, as it is food, because at that time, if you imagine that we didn't have any public transport, first we didn't have electricity, we didn't have a gas, we didn't have a telephone communication. All the theaters, we had more than 2,000 performances which were held during the siege. All those performances were packed with the people who were watching. It means when you decide to come to theater at that conditions, at that time, It means that you are absolutely are aware that you are taking the risk to be killed on your way to be present. So when I mentioned 57 performances, there is almost, I think, there is not any performance which had an propaganda, which had the intention to be some kind of propaganda, you know, like the first theater I mean, the first phenomena of the siege is that, for example, the worst day of the siege of Sarajevo was the May 2nd, 1992, and that Sarajevo War Theater, as a new theater in Sarajevo, was founded on the May 17th in the worst possible conditions, you know. So I believe that Sarajevo War Theater is only theater in Europe which was funded in the conditions of, in that kind of conditions. And I love the document in which it's described why they are funding the new theater in the conditions of war. And it was written because of its specific meaning for defense of the city. I was director of the Sarajevo War Theater much later in 2011. And when I applied to that position, I used that idea with which the theater was founded, believing how the role and art has always its function to protect, to defend the city and its values. So because, you know, like I need to jump over some things, you know, just to try to keep not to talk too long, but I will just mention few performances which I consider the most important, which were produced at that time. The first one was the first theater premiere during the siege, which was the performance Shelter, and it was interesting because that performance and text were done during the war, and the Shelter was a real space in which artists came during the siege. When the siege started, they were hiding in the shelter of the youth theater in Sarajevo. There was a group of directors, actors, different people, also people from the neighborhood who used this shelter of youth theater as a space where they hide from the shelling. And based on those communications from that shelter, late Safet Plakalo and wrote this text Shelter, which was staged by Dubravko Bibanović, and that was the probably one of the most successful theater performances done in that time, which was, you know, like even that was kind of the comedy, which is interesting phenomena also in the period of the war, and the performance which had a really huge meaning for the people of Sarajevo at that time. Another performance which is also, I consider, as the kind of the phenomena is the musical Hair, which is, you know, like the Hair was there was a famous world, I would say even world famous performance done in mentioned Atelier 2012 in Belgrade, and this Hair done in Sarajevo, which is, you know, like when you just imagine that in conditions of war in the institutional theater, you have a performance which is totally, you know, like a hippie piece and everything, and that you have a full theater, that in that theater also many soldiers who are defending the city are coming. It describes and totally, you know, like I would even sometimes say surrealistic idea of the citizens in their try to defend their own normality at those conditions. The third performances, I would mention Silk Drums of Haris Pašović and In the Country of Last Things. In the Country of Last Things was basically first translation of a book from English to Bosnian language of Paul Auster, American writer, interesting book that was kind of science fiction book that he wrote, describing the situation in one unknown place, which reminded to the siege of Sarajevo. That performance, Vanessa Redgrave came, and she came in Sarajevo during the siege, and she was performing one of the roles. And another performance of Haris Pašović, Silk Drums, which was based on the Japanese No theater. So I just hope that it is clear to audience that working no theater in the conditions of the siege, working the Paul Auster in these conditions, doing the performance, the musical Hair, and having, like an amazing response of the audience, that it is something which is really part of an phenomena which some people call the cultural resistance, but a phenomena in which people, as a response to dehumanization that they were exposed daily, that they are trying to protect their own normality. And the last performance from that period, which I would, out of those 57 that I will mention, is of course the Waiting for Godot, directed by Susan Sontag, who also came to Sarajevo during the siege. Mentioning that because Waiting for Godot it's of course not just like the text, but that was also one of the events in which, like all that idea about the role of art in Sarajevo was exported, I would say, through media outside, where people recognized this phenomena as a really something special. And I would say that often I think about it in case that some of those things happened in some of the European city, in similar conditions. For example, the Second World War, I'm pretty much sure that this phenomena is so amazing that probably it would be part of some education processes, and even if it didn't happen, I'm personally absolutely sure that all these things which happened in Sarajevo in theater during the siege are very important, not just the part of theatrical or cultural artistic heritage of Europe, but also an important experience for us today. To one of the programs that we also started during the war in Festival Mes, which is memory model, which deals with the question how we deal with the experience of genocide, of war and everything. The conclusion that we had based on all those experiences, if we try to keep even in our today's work, is something also that Milena was talking about. It's this ethical dimension of our work. So based on our experience, based on all our knowledge about the theater and art in general in Sarajevo during the siege, I will say now personally, because I know that it's not the opinion that everybody share, but I researching that for the last 30 years, I believe that our empirical knowledge says that art is only the form in which aesthetics are not divided from the ethical aspect. And for the long time, I had a huge problem to understand, because for me, always the kind of, like being artist, that was a kind of some moral category, it was always difficult to comprehend that there are many artists which are basically, we know that are not just personally good as people, but they took sometimes the side of evil, talking about that kind of the people from the Second World War, like probably Leni Riefenstahl is the best example, or talking about our experience, in which I would mention, directors like Emir Kusturica. I know we didn't have a very nice role in that period. Or the example Peter Handke, who was even awarded with the Nobel Prize award, who was one of those people who took the side of the deniers of the genocide. On the end, I finally found the answer to that thing, which I thought it's some error in everything. An answer was that if you are a great theater director, or if you are great, or if you are a great painter, or if you are a great filmmaker, it doesn't necessarily mean that you are still the artist. So for me, from my personal experience, artists should be the thing in which aesthetics are you know, like that art is always synthesis of aesthetics and ethics. So I would use you know, I would finish with that this part of the talk.
Thank you, Nika. This is also a very good point where we can put a comma on your contribution. Thank you very much. And I would continue with Janez, asking you to try to stay within 10 minutes, and then, so that we can have a few questions, and then we will postpone like the break a little bit, and then we can shrink the second part. But yes, I would please like to hear now from you about what you remember and how would you present the theatrical landscape in Slovenia at the time, and Croatia.
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Also, thank you, Milena and Nihat, for amazing introduction and description. And again, big thank you for all people in Sarajevo who were continuing doing things that you described and many other in order to keep life going on. Because maybe there are two things that are always somehow hidden from in the situation of war, hidden from media attention, big attention, and so on. One is an enormous survival struggle, desire to live normal life, one side, and the other side, not so nice, is understanding a war as just another opportunity for business. I will talk about this second part, about the second thing in the second part, but maybe what I can add next about Slovenia is, of course, the circumstances were completely different. Slovenia was the first country that was from former Yugoslav republics that was in war. The war lasted 14 days, and it's actually uncomparable with what happened in first Croatia and later in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So clear cut here. There is no things to compare. When it comes to theater landscape, I think one of the ways how to look at it, not only at theater but generally in society, is that in the 1980s, there was a strong democratic way with the rise of civil society, democratization of media landscape, and many civil initiatives that were questioning authoritarian part of socialism on one hand, and on the other hand, trying to democratize the socialist idea and socialist platform through bottom-up activities. And in that sense, the theater was part of it, as many things that took place in culture. It was a way of trying to find different ways of living different subjectivities, extending space of freedom, questioning social anomalies, proposing visions. What was strong in my memory was that it looked like in the 1990s that everything was possible, and that feeling was very much based on extreme solidarity and collaborative ethics in the scene in Ljubljana, where I belong. There was no money or very little money, but there was basically every door was open for resources that were available. The public institutions were quite similar to what Milena and Nihat described. They were puzzled and they basically didn't know at the first glance what to do, because like going on just like before was impossible. The time were so intense that required different ethical, political, social, and at the end, aesthetical approaches. And here, sometimes there is this like anecdote of a Belgian curator, Michel Eiterhoven, who came to Ljubljana in '93 or I think, and writing then the statement that to him the war doesn't seem anywhere so far as it does in Ljubljana. And I think he just could not understand that there was such a strong social optimism also in the artistic, but also generally in society, that was actually questioning fundaments, including other things of what theater is and what can it be. There were many direct initiatives. For example, Draga Potočnjak, actress and writer, very soon started to work with children of refugees from Bosnia and Herzegovina. Slovenia hosted around 70,000 and was producing performances with those people. Lately, it was also continued with the repertory theater, public theater, that were trying to, through classical plays, reflect the war situation. Although the war lasted only 2 weeks, it continued in many different ways, and it became some kind of constitutive for the political life in the country, even until now. And this, I can talk about this in the second part.
Very interesting, really, to hear. Thank you, Janez. And a little applause. Also for your incredible capacity to condense. But I'm also happy now that we have some time for questions and so on, and then we will postpone the break a little bit. So the microphone is over there. Don't be shy if you want to ask a question. Oh, the microphone can travel. That's amazing. Question or comment? You heard 3 actually very different stories within the same territory and the same time. I'm also very eloquent. I can ask many questions, but I want to hear you. No, I want to give the floor to you, and then we will continue. Any comment, additional question you want to hear about a detail?
Thank you. You all spoke about the difference between institutions and art created outside these institutions, which is very clear during war. My question is also looking at what's happening now in German institutions and art happening outside of it. Can you, when did it change back? Did eventually the institutions become re-political and places where art can actually remain political and more connected to the people and what's happening, and then what's happening in politics and leadership? And when did this happen? Like, how did this shift happen? In short, is there hope also for the German institutional theater?
This is a really great question, really crucial for our region and understanding the artistic and theater landscape in our region, but it's very good also to understand now in Germany how it works. We have had several waves but maybe, I don't know, Milena has followed the whole process for many years. If you want to answer this, it would be great.
Absolutely. There was, in several moments, as you said, several waves, ups and downs during this, let's say, in these 25 years of this millennium. In one moment, we really hoped that institutions took on themselves, for example, Oliver Frljić in Rijeka, Croatian National Theater, Kokan Mladenović in Atelier 212, made seasons. They wanted to create very, how would say, different works which are not pleasantly accepted by public opinion, by press, not only by politics, and so on. But this period lasted relatively shortly. It ended in Serbia, for example, I will tell even exactly. People would say it ended in 2012. In fact, it ended a little bit later because, you know, the new regime, when it comes, they need certain period of time to feel secure, to do what they wanted to do. That means to censor everyone and everything that do not validate them or our autocratic, powerful leaders. Maja Pelević and Milan Marković made a research performance. They copied Goebbels' program, political program from 30s, translated in Serbian, and sent to 7 different political parties saying, we would like to enlist in your party, and this is our program. If you, for culture, we notice that you don't have a cultural people in your party, etc., etc. 7 parties were very, how to say, flattered that these 2 young theater artists want to be their members and that they want to be active members. So if they have read the program or not, no one knows. Now they claim no one have read it, but they just accepted persons. But officially they accepted this program. And they made out of this research a performance. Performance meant for Yugoslav Drama Theater. But it never happened in Yugoslav Drama Theater. It was possible still at that time, not today. It wouldn't be possible today in House of Youth. House of Youth depends on the city government. So, you know, you sometimes have more liberal people in city governments than in national governments. Even in socialist Yugoslavia was so. So city of Belgrade was lucky to have very, I would say, free minds. So Bitev, for example, is a city. It's not a Serbian festival or Yugoslavian. Okay, we didn't have federal Ministry of Culture since 1953. But anyway, now the situation is such that heads of public cultural institutions are just doing censorship. The situation is such that because they couldn't prevent actors to show their bloody hands at the end of the performance, which are significant support to students' protest of today, they just closed National Theater. So the present leadership, opera singer who wouldn't be invited to perform in any opera in the world, he became the leader because that's the only employee of National Theater who would accept to be in these circumstances nominated, but also to perform censorship. So he just closed under excuse that fire protection is not well. You don't have any, even museum directors are threatened. Museum director of National Museum, how they are threatened. For example, most of them are VD, acting position. So they haven't been elected in a proper procedure. So they would like to stay directors, but that means better do nothing than to make any kind of mistake. So director of National Museum a few days ago didn't allow association of lovers of National Museum to gather and to discuss on a very universal topic. I mean, nothing really subversive. But that means that theater directors who are performing this role today are very cautious, are not of the capacity that used to be. Oliver was also had to leave, Kokan Mladenovic had to leave, etc., etc. Not, to be very honest, not due to political pressure, but the pressure of part of the ensemble and so on. Because, as I said, maybe I haven't said clearly, our society haven't been facing the crimes of the past. And still in cultural sector, it's haunting present situation, even discussion about repertory, where to go and so on. Thus, more healthy atmosphere is independent sector, but last 3-4 years, independent sector is getting zero money from public sources. So they survive on donation. For example, like a few days ago, we had a radiophonic performance and we were invited as audience to buy some drink because that's this free space. The only free space in Belgrade are now cafe bars that are earning from selling drinks and so on. There is no more free public, unfortunately, free public spaces because they are severely controlled.
Thank you, Milena, for this analysis. And maybe we can now close down this first block. I would just like to mention that, as you have heard from Milena's account, we had different waves. But here in our region, I think that we are very aware of the fragility of the institutions because they depend on the political will. So I think in general, we have maybe more trust in people than in institutions. That's a little bit like a generalized account, but we can maybe speak more in the next block. So
Just
now,
to say one phrase, that's one of the 4 demands of student protest is respect to the institutional group.
Yeah, true. So thank you very much. We can now make a little break, 10 to 15 minutes. We will continue at 5:30. And I would like to thank to the guests of the first block. Some of them you will see again, but now we can let Milena go. Thank you very much for your amazing contribution, Milena.
Thank you. Sorry that I have to leave.
Thank you. Now break. Still with us, and I want to welcome two new guests on stage with me. Two guests from the first block, Jeton Neziraj, are still with us, as you can see also on the screen, which is a result of the fact that many colleagues of mine from the region, they play various roles within the cultural landscape. So they're artists, cultural workers, curators, teachers, writers, and so on. So in this block, we will have Jeton Neziraj as actually artists and cultural workers who will present their own works and not only like giving account on the scenes in general. And two new guests here are Ivana Sajko, playwright, novelist, and performer from Zagreb, whose work moves between literature, theater, and music. Ivana is a founder of the project Buffalo in the 90s in Zagreb, and later co-founded Croatia's top literary prize, then Liebesroman, which won the HKW, Berlin International Literature Award, Familienroman, and Jeder Aufbruch ist ein kleiner Tod, which has been recently translated into English, and unfortunately I cannot recount the English translation of the title.
Every time we say goodbye.
Every time we say goodbye, very poetic. And Ivana, she was also co-editor of performance magazine Frakcija from Zagreb, which was together with Maska, that Jan is involved too, and Walking Theory that Milan and Katarina involved, that I was mentioned that I was involved too, definitely belongs to the main voices, contemporary critical voices in performing arts in our region, and she's also author of many theater essays. She's based in Berlin since 1916, and I would say that Ivana is regarded as one of the Southeast Europe's most prominent political voices in contemporary literature and theater. Next to Ivana, I want to welcome Jeton Neziraj, Kosovar playwright, curator, and cultural worker, former artistic director of the National Theater of Kosovo. He now leads Koendra Multimedia in Pristina, which is a key hub for contemporary theater. Jeton has written over 25 plays, performed from La Mama in New York to Volksbühne Berlin, Piccolo Teatro in Milan, and stages across Europe and the US. And his texts are translated into more than 15 languages. His politically sharp comedies, including One Flew Over the Kosovo Theater, have sparked debate, censorship, and international acclaim. Other notable works, like The Demolition of the Eiffel Tower, have toured widely, and he also writes on culture and political for international outlets. Jeton's practice exemplifies theater as a public forum, fearless, humorous, and deeply civic. So, welcome everyone. Yes, thank you. I'm so strict with keeping the track of time that I never give time for applause. Okay, so we will start actually with Ivana and Ivana's presentation. And maybe I don't need to announce much. You can say what you want to say about your work, what you want to highlight, and what you think is interesting in relation to the topical subject of tonight.
For me, I mean, I can't start from my work, but I think that I want to start with this, with the memory process. This question that came at the last, actually it's a question, what do we learn from this? Yeah? Is there hope? What happens in 10 years? How do we look back to the moment that is now? And I think that from what I learned, through my practice, which was, from this position of being quite helpless as a writer, especially theater writer, because, you write something which is like a score, and if you don't have an orchestra, then you're fucked, you cannot do anything. So actually, you must start to learn how to, play your own instruments and find places where you can present. So I think it's a very exhausting process of living and creating, and maybe, I mean, and we learned it. I have a feeling, my generation, we learned it in a horrifying way, because there was nothing. And as we heard, and then all of the sudden, I mean, your only, I would say, connection with the normality and connection with the future and connection with some kind of brighter space that is beyond the grayness around you is art, is imagination, is finding alliances with your friends and then doing something that is beautiful, doing something that connects, not only divides, and because it always, as you know, when you have any kind of very intense conflict situation in a society, it doesn't have to be a war. You have only two sides. You don't have there is no possibility of thinking in between, of reinventing. How do we actually think? Is it, are you for them or are you against? No, fuck that. Let's do it. Let's do it more. Let's imagine the ways that we can speak about today. And this is what actually art gives you, and then theater particularly, because it's you work with people and you're really inventing your little society. And so I think this was very important for us, for my generation, for other colleagues, artists. And in theater it was something very specific. And what I remember as growing and really wanted to work in a theater, but we were just, I mean, which is really strange, we all knew each other even then, and we were kind of kids. Maybe Emil then was a bit older, but we were very, very young people, and so this art would connect you with somebody who has the same problem as you do. So Anna wanted me to speak about my first novel that I actually made 10 years after the so-called end of war in Croatia. And I wrote this novel using theater formats, monologues and so on. And it's really strange because, and it's a very theatrical piece actually. It's like this is like a let's say, collection of theater pieces inside of the book. But it was never, and in this way, it was always calling to be on the stage. But it never happened in Croatia. But yet, it did happen in Belgrade and in some other countries. But particularly in Belgrade, and this was very important to how do we speak, to find a way. How do you speak about conflict? Maybe in this sense, particular conflict between Croatia and Serbia, in a way that it can be equally discussed in Croatia and in Serbia, that actually that it goes beyond sides, that it just kind of seeks for these possibilities of pacifism, seeks for the possibilities of just kind of escaping this political discourse and going somewhere else, really kind of giving each other a hand and kind of thinking, okay, so can we still pray together? And if this is so, like, how do we pray and to whom? And maybe we must invent this all together. And in this sense, I think that, I mean, I think it's not a finished process. And of course, always critical voices are easier to be kind of formatted outside of institutions, on the street or in the small venues and so on, but they don't have so much power. So it always this kind of, we always have this kind of, there is kind of growing of these so-called activists and making from them becoming really the real actors of the institutions who want, I mean, there is always this moment in which institutions are being changed when those people who are there, when they come in, when they take not only this responsibility, but when you become aware, okay, so 50% of what I will do now might be misunderstood, and maybe I will not do everything, but here I come, because I have this this very particular experience of working in not so good conditions. And I think this is something that is happening, and I think we had also in Croatia, there were some really great moments, and of course Croatian scene was had extreme impact of different festivals and guest performances and so on, and what Anna called somewhere second-hand knowledge. So many things never came there, but we heard about some artists or whatever, and so we improvised what this might be, and then we were all we all the time had this relation towards West and the art that was coming from there, but we didn't have possibilities to see everything. But yeah, I don't know, we were copying the books published by Routledge or something, and so we invented our own contemporarity. And yeah, so there were great moments, and then again, there are moments. Same now in Croatia, there is again this wave of censorships and so on. And here in the last few days, I was following because some theaters had premieres, and at the end of these first shows, they showed the huge banner, "This is a space of freedom," because now we are again organizing, all of us, so even me who are here, but I'm also there, in this endeavor actually to again and again to recall together that theater and art is protected space, that we are protected by the Constitution, that if I'm here, I'm in a special context, and actually I can say whatever I want. And I can provoke, and I have a right to provoke, because with this, I'm actually inciting a discussion. And this is something that we should always remember, always, anywhere, Germany, Croatia, Serbia, whatever. If we are here, we are protected by the Constitution, and there should be no reason to be scared. And if so, then we are on the right side of the law. Yeah, and the truth, I think.
But do you want to present a little bit
your
first novel?
No, sorry,
because
I also speech.
But among all your works, I just also thought that somehow, because you also deal with the forgetting in that novel, but in different ways. So, but it maybe can resonate with what Milena talked about, the culture of forgetting is official history, but in your case, it's a really intimate account, and forgetting as remaining sane. And maybe you want to say something about Rio Bar, which is one of my favorite novels that you wrote, and show some pictures.
Okay, so there are some pictures actually of the performance that I made 2019 in Gießen. This was very very interesting, because Rio Bar is performance what happens after the war, and it has few layers, but it's actually how do I remember, and what this event in the past did to me. And it's 10 years after the end. And so we are following a character who remembers in a way to write actually theater monologues. And these theater monologues go through the process, through the phases of war, from the first alarm to actually the moment in which this person is leaving a country. So, and it was really interesting, because when I came to direct this in Gießen, and then I said, oh, so many years passed since then, so we will not make a performance about the war in ex-Yugoslavia. So we will not speak about the trauma that happened. We will now try to make performance about trauma that didn't happen yet, but might come. And this was very, very strange. I remember speaking with the dramaturg, and she was like, what are you talking about? And there was something, I don't want to say that people who went through certain conflict experiences can sense something, but you can see that, but there are things around us that tell us that, there's certain dynamic that seems unstoppable. So maybe it's good to speak this way, to go into the tissue of the society, into the bars, or like these common places, and to see, okay, so what divides us? About what do we actually try not to speak, or so and so. So this is that was this performance. It looks quite sweet actually. In comparison, it's quite the content is quite violent. My idea was actually to show in this novel, and in this half novel, half theater play, to show at the end what was maybe the most important part of everything to me are the footnotes about war. And actually I was trying to construct from many documentary sources the tapestry of events, and how actually when we read the fiction, we think, oh, this is just exaggerated. But then, oh, there's a footnote. And then you go back and you actually see that there is no exaggeration, that reality of conflict is always 100 times more shocking than anything that you can actually write. And this kind of actually, working with these documentary fragments, with interviews, with, I mean, everything that it stayed the part of what I do. And then I wanted just to mention, then I did this with Bad Company, this performance which was called Mass for the Election Day Silence. And Election Day Silence is like everything, everybody must, quiet, the day before the elections. And then I also I edited many speeches from the elections then in Croatia. It was 24 years ago, it was a long time ago. And then the audience had headphones. So actually, when they were picking up what the actors and dancers are saying, and we had this random kind of interference with those speeches. And I thought that it was something painful because I was destroying my own text with this. But it was, for me, it was so authentic. This was exactly the situation, when this reality, this radio of stupidity does not want to switch off, and actually you don't hear yourself. So, yeah, I think that there are different ways that we can reflect on politics and conflict and war, and. What is the problem is always that these kind of situations, like now, this very intense political world in which we live, and each one of us start to feel, oh my God, we are now personally actually being in a way involved or struck by it. And it makes us all very eloquent, and we feel, and we want to say something, and then this follows by this frustrating lack of places from which you can speak. And this is I think this is very, very truthful feeling of conflict.
Thank you, Ivana. Maybe we can applause the applause. I have some questions, but we will come back to that at the end, so maybe we can just go on with this tapestry of attempts and tryouts with the art field. So Janez, I wanted to invite you to speak a little bit about your artistic practice, and in our preparations we decided that you would focus the Republic of Slovenia performance. So
that performance, I understand, was made as a kind of a gift to 25 year of independence of country. Many of the countries that came out of Yugoslavia didn't have their legal independence status for a long time or at all. Yeah? So for example, I'm older than Slovenia. So I'm older than the country in which I happened to be legally. And Slovenia is not the only one. Yeah? So already in earlier work that dealt with racism and chauvinism in Slovenia, where one Roma family was asked to leave the place where they were settled, that was already a brutal thing. But even more brutal was that the government was trying to find another place where they could be settled. And wherever there were voices that they are trying to find the place, there was a total refusal. Yeah? And I understood that in life of a young country, I realized that that was one of the constitutive moments of Slovenia becoming European, in Western European terms, a society. Every Western European country is deeply rooted in racism and chauvinism. The idea of national state is actually based on, if we are together, it will be better for us, only for us, than if we are with someone else. And I started to ask myself with that performance how much, let's say, some kind of negative features in history are constitutive for national identity. The second one, that I was not busy, but it's a big traumatic event, is erasure of legal rights for around 25,000 people who lived in Slovenia and who were left deprived of any rights just after the war in 1990s. There is a name for that, administrative genocide, that you, and it's, I think it's very precise, because people who were of a migrant background and lived in Slovenia, but they were coming from other republics from former Yugoslavia, they were asked if they want to be citizen of Slovenia or not. And in that moment, when history is in total confusion and you don't know what will happen tomorrow, and you have your family a couple of 100 kilometers away from Slovenia, many people didn't know and didn't want to opt for this either or. Now, you know how is the situation in Germany with either or. Only Scholz government actually changed this, that you can be either citizen of the Republic of Germany and no other country, unless other country is a member of European Union. So, and for decades, many people could not, although living here and paying taxes and so on, had rights as other residents of the country. This administrative genocide, which the government of Slovenia in 1993 did to their citizen, stayed as a traumatic event and was in a way solved with some kind of symbolic gesture after losing the case at the tribunal in Strasbourg, where those who were victims of that administrative genocide won the appeal against the Republic of Slovenia, and they had to pay compensation. The government, the state has to pay compensation. The third event that is deeply embedded in political life in Slovenia is the role of authorities in Slovenia in weapon dealing. Yeah? So what was the situation in 1991 with the supply of weapons? Yeah? So the conflicting sides, depending from the conflicting sides in Slovenia were Yugoslav army and Slovenian forces that were created just before that conflict. In Croatia, almost the same. So Yugoslav army, like former Yugoslav People's Army, that then mostly were affiliated with Milosevic and the authorities in Serbia. But in Croatia already there was sections of the country that local people rebelled because it was not only Croatians that lived there. In Bosnia was much more complicated situation. However, also there was a Yugoslav army, which was considered after the Second World War a very strong army in military terms. So the other sides that were not Yugoslav army had to somehow weaponize themselves. It's a very long and complicated story, but what was important for what I wanted to say is that United Nations in September '91 accepted embargo on exporting weapons to the territory of former Yugoslavia. Yeah? So it was absolute prohibition to export. Yeah? It was not a prohibition of import. So in case, like the countries who were formed and on the territory of former Yugoslavia, they could import. But how could they import if export was prohibited? Yeah? So this business was illegal. Because it was illegal, the authorities could not be directly involved, and they had to find parallel ways how to do with that. Yeah? The Slovenia became important hub for transporting weapons from whatever countries, and it was really from whatever country, because war is a big business, it's a huge business, yeah? Because the port of Koper Capodistria was not under UN control, comparing to the ports, other ports in the Adriatic Sea. So a lot of weapons came to Slovenia and went through Slovenia. There were different waves. For example, when Soviet army left former countries of Warsaw Pact, everyone wanted to get rid of Russian weapons. So suddenly there was an enormous amount of weapon that was coming from former Eastern Bloc. Israel was very important supplier, and also many other Western countries. I'm going back to the crucial fact here that this was illegal. The business was illegal. Yeah? So I will show you excerpt from the performance, The Republic of Slovenia, that deals with very complex and complicated story that was never resolved. Yeah? So I came to this idea to be busy with after reading books about weapon dealing by two investigative journalists, Blaž Gaga and Matej Šurc. These are three thick books with a lot of documentary material that didn't have the weapon dealing never had any kind of legal consequences for those who were doing illegal business, no matter how well documented that was. Yeah? So reading those books and seeing like how were the different attempts to resolve this big enigma of weapon dealing and authorities involved in that, Slovenian authorities involved in that, also in Croatia and so on, but here the book is specifically focused on Slovenia. I actually got scared because when you read that there are forces in the country, I'm not paranoid, as who knows me knows that I'm not a paranoid, but basically reading that, you realize that if somebody wants to get rid of you, they will get rid of you. talking structurally in living in a democratic society. And I think those who are more researching deeply into what kind of silencing and elimination of the people that you want to get rid of can analyze this much better, yeah? But in Slovenia, in Slovenian context, car accidents were the way. Like you would get rid of, or you would silence someone with a car accident. There were like repeated issues in which those that were trying to bring voices and so on. So just to finish this, the show has 3 parts, and in the first part, there is a former counterintelligence officer, Brane Praznik, who is telling a story about counting cash. In Hollywood movies, there is always like a suitcase and all the money inside is ironed, you know, it's perfect, just arrived from the factory, yeah? In ex-Yugoslavia, weapon dealing was in cash, yeah? And the money back then was coming from diaspora, and it was in very different currencies. So he's telling a story how he had to count, he got order to count 17 million Deutschmarks one by one, yeah? And iron them and so on. It's a beautiful story which brings horror of the war in a very detailed, particular story.
Shall we now watch the video?
Yes, just introduce it. The second part is basically not really reenactment, but could be also call it like this, of the meeting of the top politicians in Slovenia. Yeah? It was a classified document when I read it, and when I read this transcription, magnetogram of the meeting, I thought I'm reading the best theater play ever written, because it's incredible in many directions, the language they speak, how they speak. They are 6 politicians coming from the entire spectrum, from left to the far right, and you will see they talk as buddies. It's like, hey, shall we do this and all? And you have philosophical debate about how to talk to people and to the citizen of Slovenia and so on. So it's the meeting at the office of the president of the country, former communist leader, liberal politician, with ministers of interior affairs, foreign affairs, defense. Defense minister was the one who was responsible for weapon dealing and has the same name as I do, and the prime minister and the president of the parliament. Yeah? So this is now short excerpt in which they are discussing what to do. And the president of the country is organizing this meeting in early 1993 because media started to report that Slovenia is sending weapons to Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina, which as a member, freshly accepted member of United Nations, they were not supposed to do. And they have now this big political debate what to do. On first level, to stop or not to stop, you know, to sell or not to sell weapons, that is the question. But the other level, equally important, is to silence journalists or not, to lie to the public or to say truth. And maybe
let's now watch the video,
yeah.
Because we have also 2 more presentations, yeah. And let's watch the video.
Jasna stvar je, da to delajo vse države. Tudi ta pomoč Bosni. Najbrž nismo samo mi, ampak o tem se ne govori in o tem ni uradnih dokumentov. so, seveda.
Jaz ne vem, to je najbrž v povezavi tega, da se javno tudi kaj reče.
Ne zdaj, ampak mislim, da najprej bi bilo treba, kakšne stvari demantirati. Ker če res bodo te dokumente objavili v tej mediji, vprašanje pa je, kaj vse imajo. To je popolnoma iracionalno.
Zdaj, če tako gledam, če ni drugih pojavov, negativnih, samo dejstvo, da smo mi nekaj časa, na primer, dopuščali ta tranzit za Hrvate, pa tudi za Bosance, muslimane, šlo je praktično v enem sklopu. Po daljšenem sklopu tudi te jugovojne. To samo po sebi ni nič slabega in tudi naša javnost bi jo sprejela.
In tudi v Ženevi, v Bruslju smo o tem govorili.
Morebiti bi še celo javnost rekla, bi se začudila, češ, da nismo nič pomagali takrat. Vprašanje je neke točke, kjer je treba to prekiniti. To je, recimo, sedaj ta točka, zato ker mi se želimo popolnoma vrniti, izvleči iz tega kaosa. Zdaj so vprašanja, ali čisto a priori to zanikati, ali pač najbrž se temu izogibati, če se le da.
Kot vprašanje, v kontekstu mednarodne situacije, ki je bila deloma tukaj nakazana, je to lahko uporabno kot nek argument zoper Slovenijo, kjer se ne spoštuje embarga in dovoljuje. Čeprav je res, da je treba tukaj natančno pogledati, kaj je ta dikcija embarga. Embarga, kaj je ta dikcija?
Tranzit je...
Mislim, da je to to.
Ne, tranzit je pod embargom.
Je pod embargom, to da, mi smo se takrat dogovorili za tak sistem. Kakorkoli potem računati, da bo kdo to razumel doma, mislim, da to ni dobro.
Takrat bi bili vsi za to, da se pomaga. Čez 2 leti se pa pozabi, kaj je bilo takrat.
Čez 2 leti ali čez pol leta. Hočem reči, če nam bo potem bolj važno to, da si nekaj zataji, kar je bilo res, kot že pač samo dejstvo, da si nekaj tajil. Ali je to boljše?
Ali mi lahko to vežemo na odločitev Varnostnega sveta o uvedbi embarga in na vstop Slovenije v Združene narode? Te stvari tako postavljamo deloma na to, da prej nismo bili polnopravni člani Združenih narodov, zdaj pa smo. Do takrat so pač stvari tekle v okviru naših možnosti, tako smo tudi rekli. Od takrat naprej pa tega nismo delali. Sej, bolj delikatno kot tisto orožje, tisto urjenje, ampak tisto je bila ena sama skupina.
Samo embargo je bil mnogo prej, preden smo mi to delali.
Sej, embargo tudi za nas verjamem, pa tudi smo bili zavezani sankcijami.
Zdaj je važno, če mi zdaj odločimo, da s tem nehamo.
Po mojem to ni bilo pod sankcijo.
Ne. Tisto je veliko bolj delikatno kot pomoč v orožju. Ampak tisto smo itak takrat spravili iz dnevnega reda. Jaz mislim, da tisto ni problematično.
Me je pa iskal Velajati včeraj, pa me ni našel.
Ali Akbar Velajati, takratni iranski zunanji minister. 2 meseca po tej seji je obrambni minister Janez Janša podpisal izvozno dovoljenje za prodajo topovskih cevi Iranu.
Za naprej. Mislim, da smo se zmenili. Mislim, da je s tem konec.
To zahteva določeno proceduro, predvsem dogovor naših ministrstv. Potem, ko boš ti upravil, kako se to sporoči sogovornikom in kako se te stvari uredi.
Koliko je sploh tega? Kaj se trenutno dogaja?
Zdaj ne teče več.
Jaz predvsem predlagam, da mi to sklenemo in ne rečemo nobenemu nič. To ne gre konkretne zahteve. Stvar poteka tako, da oni uradno najprej pošljajo papir. In ko to bo, če sploh bo, čez 1 mesec, mi dobimo 1 mesec. Zdaj pri Hrvatih ne vem, pri Bosancih, Izetbegović požel marsikaj. Pri Hrvatih bo pa to sprožilo reakcijo, ne glede na to, da tega praktično ne potrebujejo več.
Tem ostanemo pri tej proceduri.
To je dobra rešitev. Zaradi tega, ker nam zdaj omogoča premislek. Lahko tudi posamezne konkretne primere zakamufliramo, pa vlečemo nekaj časa.
Ja, ker zdaj je 1 mesec, še več zadeve stojijo.
Potem postavimo to na ta način. svojima dvema pa videla to povejte, tisti pač, ki morajo to vedeti. Za nazaj, za interpretacijo vse pa je treba zmeniti. Mislim, da je za nas najbolj elegantna stvar, če bi lahko rekli, da smo pomagali poslancem in Hrvatom. Dogovoriti pa bi se morali tukaj, kako pojasniti, kako so stvari tekle, ali od sprejema v Združene narode, kajti potem seveda bi veljalo...
To seveda ustreza resnici.
Resnici ne ustreza nič, ker tu sta dve resnici. Ena za javnost, ena pa za to.
Jaz predlagam, da se ne pojasnjuje nič.
Ne za zdaj. Ampak mi moramo imeti odgovor, če se bo ta stvar vlekla naprej.
Signali so, da bo.
Ja, jaz ne vem. Oni so na televiziji zadnjič rekli, jaz nisem bral tega, ampak takrat so nam grozili, da bodo objavili, od katerih držav smo to kupovali.
Pa to je v redu, ker nič nismo kupovali.
Ne, čakaj. Od katerih smo mi? S tem bodo seveda spravili težave tiste države, ne nas.
Vrsta nekorektnosti je pri tem. In še tiste, ki so nam pomagali takrat, ko smo mi sami za sebe naredili pomoč.
Samo Izrael.
Te stvari so od takrat, od takih stvareh, na tak način v javnosti pisati in polemizirati ni pametno.
To se strinjam. Jaz predlagam, da ne bi bilo nobenih uradnih pritožb na to, nobenih uradnih pojasnil, nič, to se nas ne tiče, to pač žurnalisti pišejo nekaj svoje. Najbolje je biti čisto tiho, ne komentirati. Madonna, no govor, ki se zadnje čase najbolj pogosto uporablja. No comment, nimam kaj komentirati.
Just to say that the actors, like actors who are as a part of the working process, they had a unique chance to write to their characters. It's almost impossible. You cannot write to Hamlet or to Ophelia, but they wrote, yeah? And the former president of the country replied, the only one who replied. One of the 6 characters was dead already, but replied. It even came to see the show and even accepted to have a talk before, after the show. I don't remember anymore. Yeah.
And have you performed it in some other countries of former Yugoslavia?
Not of former Yugoslavia.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Janez. Nihad, you are still with us on the screen. We can now move again to Sarajevo and Nihad's practice and the MES festival. Now you have some also like 10 to 15 minutes to present your work and the festival.
I would like to start with this video, this longer one.
You can organize it as you like it. So the first goes the video.
Yeah, longer one, yeah.
They want 20 minutes.
Gledaj, znači odozgo kad ide raketa, ide na grad.
Evo, pa vidite.
Ali je to isto mi... Jo.
Sarajevo bombardé. Cela fait bientôt 3 mois que la capitale bosniaque subit chaque jour le feu de l'artillerie serbe. Un siège sans pitié pour les 300 000 habitants de la ville. La moindre sortie dans les rues tient d'une véritable partie de roulette russe. À Sarajevo, la mort frappe n'importe où, à n'importe quel moment. On parle de 1300 tués depuis le début des combats, sans compter les blessés et les disparus. Un carnage qui a lieu au cœur même de l'Europe.
pobijedio Alberto Tomba. Ispred Atle Skardala, koji zaostaje za njim samo jednu stotinku. Nagrade ću uručiti, ja. Prvoplasirani Alberto Tomba će dobiti pola kilograma mlijeka u prahu. Hvala. Drugoplasirani dobiva već korišten feta sir. Gdje je treći? Poginuo je. Poginuo je. Nije treći. Poginuo je. Italijanska himna. Vidi. Samo što prođe.
Situacija sa kojom se susrećemo u Bosni i Hercegovini, gdje je samo za 4 sedmice aprila skoro pola miliona ljudi napustilo svoje domove, po mišljenju predstavnice Visokog komisarijata, uporediva je sa zbivanjima u Mozambiku, ali je teža nego je to ikad bilo u Kambodži.
Ja sam rekao da tako treba da pognem uvijek. I ja sam rekao odmah, najdraže mi bilo snajperskim metkom odla da mi zgodi smrt bez greške, naučno dokazano.
You hear me, yeah?
Yes, we hear you.
So this is the expert from the film Do You Remember Sarajevo that I did with my twin brother and Nedim Ali Kadic. And I wish to use this just also for this first part, just to demonstrate about what kind of conditions we talk when I was talking about the 57 theater premieres, 2 film festivals held during the siege of Sarajevo, or thousands of different cultural events, including film projections, photo exhibitions, stuff. I would like listening others, I would like to make it clear that the position of Bosnia, and especially the position of Bosnia was pretty much different from the situations when we talk especially about the Serbia, but also about Croatia and Slovenia. Talking about this embargo, I would like, for example, to underline important fact for the Bosnians. Embargo and weapons, which was established by United Nations, affected primarily Bosnians, because Serbians had the weapons, Croatians already had the weapons, and the only Bosnian forces were left without any weapons. So on the beginning of the war, especially even in this period, while these footages are taken, mostly people were defending the place almost without anything, you know. And we believe that position of international community with this embargo put Bosnians into the position to be exposed to war crimes, including the crime of genocide, which happened in 1995 by the Hague Tribunal. This film was important also for us because today it became normal thing. People probably younger people, they even don't know that the 90s were kind of the digital revolution in which for the first time, even that we had video cameras before, but for the first time, video cameras became approachable to people. So ordinary people had the opportunity to record what is going on. So that kind of the democratization of art brought by technology is something which was the thing that we recognized, and that was the reason that we collected hundreds and hundreds of hours of different materials recorded by citizens of Sarajevo, where we we made this film. The last guy who was talking about how he wouldn't mind to be killed, but just to be hit with a sniper directly to his head. One of those guys was 20 few years old, Dino Mustafic, the guy who was the first director of International Theater Festival MES that I'm running today in 1997. He was at that moment only 27 years old, and he was the oldest in the festival. First, I underline that because I hardly imagine today in Bosnia that somebody so young would get a chance to have such a position. And I was working there at that time also, and in 1997 we restarted the festival with changing the concept, becoming the International Theater Festival, inviting the troops like the, I don't know, Piccolo Teatro, I don't know, Living Theater, because they were before in the 70s in Sarajevo. And I'm mentioning that because very soon our policy was, you know, like to start the communication with our neighbors, you know. So these things in which we were together till the 90s was, you know, we were totally divided, you know, like people took different sides. So we thought and we discussed about it, how it is important to invite the troops from Serbia and Croatia to Sarajevo, and we believe it's important that we from Sarajevo start this communication as soon as possible. We started first the communication with the Kosovo. Kosovo was still not recognized as the independent state. We invited the Dona Theater from Kosovo. For us, it was important. Performance was also Waiting for Godot, directed by Fadil Hisaj. Very soon we invited the troops from Croatia, and few years after we restarted the festival, we invited the troops from Belgrade. I remember those discussions, you know. Today it's totally normal thing that we have this and co-productions together and everything. But at that time, that was still, you know, the thing which required discussion, how people will react when we invite the theater troupe from the Belgrade, because, you know, many of us, we lost members of family. You know, there is no one in Sarajevo who was in Sarajevo who didn't lose someone. And on the end, we decided that it's important to invite, and we invited Yugoslavian Drama Theater, and there was a standing ovations after that, you know, like people loved it. We knows that Yugoslavian Drama Theater was a pretty institution which really was opposing to many things in Serbia during the Slobodan Milošević rule. All these things, you know, this communication with the colleagues is something which we consider as a result of our own experience. In that sense, talking about our communication today, for example, I feel very sorry for the situation of Bitev Theater today. I just today read the article how the new director is facing again the censorship of the state. They had a problem because he invited Milo Rao, you know, again. Milo Rao gave the speech, which was the huge problem because he was talking about these multi-companies which want to search for the lithium in Serbia, you know. So obviously that we are facing, all of us facing corruption on different levels. So I would have a lot of things to speak, and about different efforts to work together. I would say that our communication between each other today is a pretty good, you know. I mean, with mostly, and with the theaters and individuals, you know, we are at the moment aware that our colleagues are under the huge political pressure in Serbia. But the thing which we took from our experience, and the most important thing, I was mentioning that we believe that art should be synthesis of ethics and aesthetics. One of the things which are required from us is this empathy, you know. Us in Bosnia, with the experience that we have, for us, you know, like we started on 95 program called the Memory Model to see how to deal with the radical situations through art. And for us, it was important, at least we hoped at that time, that we will be the people who will be the first who will raise the voice against the injustices worldwide. Unfortunately, today we are witnesses that even worse thing that the thing which we survived here, including the genocide, is happening in Palestine. And this thing again put in front of us important decisions. When Ivana was talking, she mentioned something which, you know, like I understand totally the point of view, but for example, she was talking about it, how we are always required to take a side, and it's like something that we shouldn't choose. I will use the example of Susan Sontag, who was directing the Waiting for Godot in Sarajevo, and she was one of few artists who visited Sarajevo under the siege. And she was also talking a lot about the responsibility of artists and the intellectuals in the radical situation. The reality of radical situations is that I honestly believe that sometimes we are forced to take some side. It doesn't mean that we are, of course, that world is not black and white, but in some situations, like it was the war in Bosnia, or as we say, aggression on Bosnia, like we were really appreciating artists who took a side, being loud about these things which happened here. And as I already mentioned, things which happened were really mass killings, you know, raping women, destroying the cultural monuments, killing more than 100,000 people. So based on those experiences, our knowledge about the reality of art is still this one in which ethics of every one of us is primarily in radical situation, and I believe that we live in the world which is really dramatic, very much requires to be loud on these things which are happening in Palestine today. So I'm mentioning this because I would really feel bad as someone talking about the experience from the 90s, from the perspective of the Bosnians, not to make that very, very clear.
Thank you, Nihad. And now, of course, this is also very good prelude to what Jeton will present, who will bring us to 2025, to the context of Kosovo and from Kosovo to South Africa. So please.
Thank you. I always think it's a good joke to ask people from ex-Yugoslavia to be short, 5 to 7 minutes. And not only to be short 5 to 7 minutes, but to speak about 90s. So I'll be very short, but make sure you use the bathroom if you have to, otherwise, yeah, it will take some time. Actually, Nihat was mentioning a couple of names and a couple of concepts that I was also planning to use, including the name of Dodona Theater, a theater that was operating in the 90s and that was very important for the cultural and theater life in Kosovo, but also the term cultural resistance, that I prefer to say spiritual resistance. I was often asked with this question that we have also in this panel, how theater makers, how theater creators respond to the war, to the conflicts, and concretely how did they respond to the ongoing violence in Kosovo in the 90s. My answer is that they were confused, basically. They were surprised, not that they didn't know that the war was coming and that the violence was there and that things are changing, but they just didn't believe that they are going to be prevented to do what they were doing before, like staging and producing things, because that was the only practice they knew, taking a text, bringing actors on stage, and then producing a play, whatever. So that was the kind of classical or conventional way of producing. And when this became problematic, because in 90s, early 90s, when the war in Bosnia had started, then, as you know, Milosevic was sending his police and the forces in Kosovo, and that meant also introducing new policies, meaning that the power then was shifting. He got the power from the Albanian workers, including cultural workers, and then giving to his followers, his clowns, basically. And so the management of theaters has changed, and the director of back then was called Popular Theater of Pristina, that was an Albanian, was replaced with a Serbian one, and the constellation started to change within cultural institutions and theaters as it was changing in the whole Kosovo. So theater became also kind of mirror, not only metaphorically, but also concretely a mirror of what was going on in the society. So the theaters, like this theater, National Theater, which is now called National Theater of Kosovo, that had two ensembles, Albanian and Serbian ensemble of actors, and was divided, because until then Albanian actors were also playing in the Serbian shows, but in this period this was almost impossible, and the repertory changed. So what was before 5 to 7 plays, let's say 5 in Albanian, 2 in Serbian, according also to the number of the population in Pristina, was reversed to, I don't know, 7, 8 in Serbian, and eventually 1 in Albanian. But then people started to refuse to go to this theater because in the public it became kind of, that's the theater that belongs to the Serbs. But in this period, many theater makers then refused to do theater, because for them it was like polluting the idea of doing theater with this new reality that was very, very brutal. So they were left without jobs. They were kicked out of the institutions, basically. And then many of them, as Nihat and you also were explaining, they decided to emigrate. Many of them didn't produce anything for like, I don't know, almost 10 years. And after the war, when they started to go back to the theater, they couldn't really get connected to the new vibrations, new sensibility, new audience was there. So their aesthetic was old-fashioned, and they just couldn't really relate to the post-war period anymore. But in that period, a theater was a theater, a small theater in Pristina called Dodona Theater became very important cultural institution for Albanian audience. For some reasons, there was a new manager, a new director in place, a Serbian theater maker, but for some reason that we don't clearly get, the theater was allowed to produce shows in Albanian, also we believe because a man that was in charge for the Albanian shows was a very famous ex-Yugoslav actor, Faruk Begoli. Somehow he was highly respected both in Kosovo and Serbia, and I think they didn't kind of want to go that far to stop him also producing. And he was also professor in the Faculty of Arts, so then he started to bring his students in that theater, and the theater became really a very important place, the only place basically that was producing shows in Albanian. And going to the theater in that period was, or meant to take risk. So it was also for the actors on stage who were producing, because of the police patrols, because of course shows were happening in the afternoon. So it was really difficult to reach that theater. So I, as a student of that time, I had to take side roads to see shows, mostly comedies, because that's what they were doing. Actually, also copying a show that was produced in Sarajevo in late 80s. I don't know the title in Bosnian, but a very successful comedy that audience was really breaking doors to enter. And so, but going to the theater was meant to take risk. And I think this idea of, this is how I started to understand theater, and I think this became also a way how I understand and how I practice theater today. To take risk, to do something in order, I mean, taking risk to do something, but also audience to take risk to come and see something. So after the war, this kind of sensibility in which I was involved as a young student, as a theater maker of that time, became kind of my identity as a writer, as a theater maker. And most of the plays, and if I only show you the titles, I think you will get an idea. So from One Flew Over the Kosovo Theater, Balkan Bordello, 55 Shades of Gay, The Return of Karl May, Peer Gynt from Kosovo, the Handke Project. So those are 6 against Turkey, Negotiating Peace, and the last one is the one that we are going to see. In all of those shows, we try to dig beyond what is kind of, let's say, visible, what is, because to me, I mean, to me, theater means to bring contradictions on stage, but also to kind of create contradictions between the stage and the audience. If everything is like linear, so to say, in the content and the audience, what is the risk? What is the need, the hunger for the audience to come and like witness that event? And so most of the shows that we produced after the war were like, producing debates here and there. We had to have, in most of the cases, police around the theater, and not only when we had our shows in Pristina, but also when we brought our work in Belgrade, and this was a constant, permanent thing, that whenever we produce something, we would that show bring it to the audience in Belgrade, until maybe 4 or 5 years when things started to change very dramatically, I would say, in Serbia, meaning that nobody from Kosovo is welcomed, meaning no artist. Also us who were and who have been also critical within the Kosovo society and within Kosovo politics. So the show, the extract that we are going to see is the last one. You know, I always use this anecdote that when you ask a theater maker, he says the last piece is the best piece. So when they asked me to present a short extract, I thought, oh, the last one, which is from last night, actually. I mean, it's not the last night was the opening, but the extract that you are going to see are from the rehearsals, and also some video footages to show you the way the research was done. And we are discussing bringing on stage 2 big historical initiatives, one in Kosovo in the 90s, the action of blood reconciliation. So until then, many Albanian families were caught in this blood feud, revenge thing. So The number of the families that reconciled was around 2,000, with around 30,000 family members who were like blocked and isolated within the walls because they didn't dare to go outside. So about 4% of the Kosovo population was somehow involved in those blood feuds. So in 90s, a group of women, former political prisoners, got this idea of let's reconcile people because the war was in horizon coming, and then they thought, what chances do we have to survive if in a war we have to also protect our backs? And actually the idea came by a very concrete incident. 3 young students were killed in Peja, in one city of Kosovo, in one of the protests by the Serbian police, of course, at that time. But in the afternoon, the Minister of Internal Affairs of Serbia was saying that, you know, no police was killing young people, but they are killing each other because of this blood feud thing. And then those 3 or 4 women, former political prisoners, they initiated the idea of reconciling bloods, as we say in Albanian. And then from a very small peripheric action became a national action, ending up with around 500,000 people gathering in the last session before it was forbidden by the Serbian regime of that time. So this historical event in Kosovo, and the second that we brought as a mirror to this one is TRC, Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as you know, an initiative that was installed after the apartheid in order to enable this transition from the old or the apartheid state to the new South Africa, in order to kind of bring justice, in order to help healing the society. So we worked with a group of South African actors, again, you know, very paradoxal, Kosovo and South Africa, but it is working, and the play just premiered, and now we are starting the tour, including, of course, next April in South Africa. So I suggest we see this extract, and then eventually we can discuss a little bit more.
Tomorrow I would like to have...
Until 2
It's up to me.
But today many things are coming in the States.
It's still in my head.
You want us to sing the song?
Her son was killed on the day she had to fake her son's death.
It was not acceptable to leave the face of the victim on the ground. You had to respect their dignity.
Were you or anyone you know part of this I will kill you and your family will kill me blood killing thing?
My uncle was.
Oh, tell me.
Once he killed a bear in the forest, and that other took revenge.
On that day, a woman called Letabo Kumalo was the first on the list to give her testimony.
To say from the bottom of my heart that I ask for your forgiveness.
Det är lugnt. När du vedin, när du dranicen, när du regnin, när du kret poplen šitar.
Šta
Шоку Антон. Вологи пригів се ситуації в Україні, в Косово. Се курва пордінят джокен фальсагишен.
Voor Kambinton, Shiptar, moet je opvallen, je gaat het
Strija Doran. Folkor Joker.
Io ti sa fuori le violi, fuori che famiglia.
Strija Doran. Folkor.
Hajde moram djemo. A ti kad moraš?
Gente si vede sotto di che il successo sentimi dirci per tre.
Soweto under fire.
The massacre at Sharpeville. 69
the
people.
country's largest township had a dark cloud hovering over it. June 16, 1976 presented a new form of resistance towards the Afrikaans language policy introduced under the Bantu education.
One stunned youngster froze and watched
under the then apartheid government. It was under Bantu education that the then apartheid government spent 642
Near us, where the
Reconciliation Commission, which is headed by Nobel laureate Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
That's true, and I was also injured on my sternum, just below my ribs.
Of June the 16th.
I have to lift up my hands before I can speak. I get enough power to speak when I stretch out my hands.
among them 2 children who were hit in their own homes.
Joe Jordan, now a member of the
Those
Eastern
electric shocks tore my private parts to pieces.
I think we can stop it here because it's 30 more seconds more. But so basically what happened in Kosovo in that period was that this whole concept of honor and bravery was reversed. Until then, bravery and the good Albanian was the one who was taking revenge. And this action, actually, those people created a different concept of bravery as forgiveness as a superior act of bravery. So they asked people to forgive in the name of the youth, in the name of the flag, in the name of the future. So those were the kind of tags. They didn't ask people to forgive the blood of their relative to the killer or to the family of the killer, but to some kind of artificial devices, so to say, future, youth, and flag. Well, in South Africa, you know, the forgiveness or the TRC was deeply rooted into the religion because of the presence of Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. In Kosovo, it was really completely different concept. So people forgave, and they didn't ask anything for compensation. I mean, the only compensation was like sort of national compensation, the idea of freedom. By forgiving, we are contributing to the freedom. So they were applauded by the people on stage. So it became, because the act of reconciliation happened first in private houses, in small rooms, and then they would go on stage to these big gatherings, into this kind of performative act of shaking hands, and then getting this kind of public gratitude because people would applaud them and see them as heroes because they are contributing to the common good. In South Africa, the compensation was very crucial element. It was promised by TRC, and unfortunately, only few or some got small compensation, and that's why you still have people, let's say, in Johannesburg still protesting. I mean, families of the victims of the apartheid, and also this perpetrators were never really accused. There was some kind of blanket amnesty, as they call it. And so those are the still kind of pressing issues there, and we try to put them together to see how they kind of work together. What are the, in terms of context, of course, there are big differences, but then there are also similarities. Both were poor people, including Kosovars that were the poorest in ex-Yugoslavia, oppression and violence, or went through the violence. So we had some kind of, we have some similarities, but also lots of differences.
Thank you, Jeton. You did your best. But I think it's a complex piece, and I also see that these different approaches to reconciliation, they're not incompatible, and somehow in a new way they resonate with the heritage of the last 35 years of our common history, where we heard also from Milena and from many of you, like about the forgetting and oblivion, and then about reconciliation and what could be a reason in the future, what is on the horizon, how to keep this peace more stable, for the sake of what, and then how to overcome what has happened in the past without digging into that. So I think at the same time it's about never forgetting, keep digging into that, and thinking about reconciliation as a common stake into a future. But what, in this global world in which we live today, what is that? I don't know if you have any thoughts at the end to share about that. Then if Katarina allows, we can have a little round with the audience. But I would really like to hear from you, because you are all such a deep thinker, and I felt our wars and trauma, everything again, while now listening to you and watching the excerpts and so on. What would be your thoughts about the future of that?
Personally, I mean, I don't know. I mean, Desmond Tutu was using this motto, "Truth will set us free." I mean, that became also the main motto of the TRC. So, what kind of truth? How to define the truth today in this post-truth era, so to say, or where truth is like nowhere and like it doesn't really, nobody cares about the truth. So what kind of mechanisms do we need, devices, to kind of repeat processes like this? Because they happened, they were real. I mean, the one in Kosovo was real, the one in South Africa was real. And, you know, is it possible? This is a big question that I don't know. I mean,
Sorry? I'm just encouraging the speakers to speak, so.
Well, I think what Jeton showed here, I think that's maybe the concept of the future, when we think, okay, where do we go? Is this not thinking only about the past, but thinking also about the future? So where do we go from here? And what kind of peace is possible? Can we think about peace without thinking that the way to peace is eliminate somebody, yeah? Which is what we live right now, that actually the path towards stability is always elimination of a certain group. And I think that this is very important. And for example, what is happening now in the last 6 months in Croatia, it started with, it's a long story, but obviously there are groups that want to, in a way, destabilize the country. And actually what happened is this kind of reinvention of the nation in a form of a war hero. So we have certain public artists that they come from popular music, but they're kind of gathering around them people who necessarily, they're not nationalists. I don't want to say this, but I want to say there is kind of, it's playing with the nationalism, playing with the war or military signs, playing with these kind of bad memories. It's something, don't get me wrong, like you would think Rammstein in Germany, something like this. But in this case, really precise. So it's not only the style, it's not imaginary, it's really precise. And actually, and I'm wondering, and I made recently, I was in Croatia, and then I made this interview, and it was not well received. But I was just talking about this idea, can we reinvent who we are? Can we think of ourselves as really nice people who live next to the seacoast, and we like to sing together, and we had amazing artists, we have scientists, and we have children. So can we reinvent how we think about ourselves without falling into this trap of people with guns in their hands? And I think this is the start, reinventing for the sake of the future.
Reaffirming values that were there but were pressed, because like this action of blood reconciliation happened in the 90s, early 90s, in a period of 6 months. But then, like, you can hardly find any story in public about this process, because then the war came and the new narratives, you know, this militarization of the public life, so to say, and then there was no room for stories like this. And I think that's what theater can do, reaffirm and bring back some values and some normality from the past, because it existed.
Just to follow what you said, I think from what I learned from many examples tonight is actually that theater matters as a public space, as a place where people come because things matter there. And what is then that matters, that people would then come and so on, I think, you know, depending on the context of time, space, and so on. But the only hope, yeah, for theater is always to be the place where people come to see what matters. And I think that is responsibility within the small world in which we are talking today. And I don't think there is a formula for this, because it very much depends. So it's actually great to see how what was happening in Sarajevo in the 90s. It's great to see what you are doing today, taking theater seriously as a public place, as a place, yeah.
Yeah, in a way even more serious than many politicians in our region take the society and the politics. Yeah, but Nika, do you want also to say something about this?
Yeah, I mean, of course, there is no answer to that question, and it doesn't depend on us very much. That kind of things mostly depends on politicians. But theoretically, of course, that the truth should be the most important thing. The fact that I live in the country where we have a free versions of truth doesn't necessarily mean that there are free truths, but the reality is that there are three perspectives of truth at least. The second thing, which is also very important, is of course education and the approach to education. For example, recently I had some lecture about the First World War, and I find out very interesting, for example, in all the books that we have, even in Germany, but in Serbia, in Kosovo, in Croatia, in Bosnia, in France, in Britain, when, for example, when there are conclusions about the wars, there is always that sentence about winning sides. So we, for example, we get informations, I don't know, that after the First World War, the France was on the winning side, I don't know. But, you know, if you ask the soldier who was fighting in Verdun, you know, who lost his leg, who lost his eye, who lost, you know, who lost almost any capacity for the life, I'm not sure that he would consider himself very much as the winner. But for me, it was very interesting that we never had in the history books on the end who profited from the war, because I would be very interested, even in case of Bosnia, that I have a list of people who became richer after the Bosnian War, or who became richer in Croatia after the war, who became, because we know, for example, if you research, we know that you know, like Remington, for example, after the First World War became, that it was good for them. For many bankers, it was good. For the stock market, it was good. For you know, their Colt company, you know, Remington. So we should have the names of individuals and companies who profited from the tragedy. And I think it would be very helpful to understand the real nature of the war. On another side, researching these things with art and everything, one period I was collecting the letters of the people that they wrote, because our war with 95, almost letters disappeared. Almost no one writes the letter to someone. We are sending mails, sending the messages over the phone. And when I was reading those letters, it was interesting in Bosnia, because when you send a letter, you never know till person receives that letter, will he be or she alive? And all those letters I used to read were so emotional, you know, like made me cry every time. It's the letter of daughter to mother, boyfriend to girlfriend, husband to wife, wife to husband, sister to brother. And collecting those letters, I find out that it would be probably much better also on perspectives of war, that we follow the perspectives of mothers, you know, or in our histories, we always have this pretty much male perspective of the wars, and you know, it's always kind of and heroic and blah blah blah. But when you read the perspective of the war, or someone who is waiting for a kid's, you know, husband, you know, I think that we get much better reality of those situations. So I think that creating the fear out of situation like the war could be the practical things. And I believe that art can help in those things, you know, like making people aware of the reality, not just of the past, but of present, hoping that with the affirmation of truth, we could make, at least more senseful society.
Thank you. We still have some time for some questions from the audience or comments.
It will only be a short comment. Thank you so much. Because that was like a really dense insight into a history that is rarely told in Western Germany, Western Europe. And I have a lot to think about.
Yeah, thank you also from my side for this super interesting panel, very long panel. And I was asking myself if you are, or some of you are in touch with theater makers and artists from regions that have war at the moment. For example, I was thinking about if there is any exchange with Syrian artists. I know some theater makers in the diaspora, and I think it's so important to get in touch and to speak about these topics also with people from other countries that are in war at the moment.
There in Berlin, because I'm based there, there's an organization which is called Wir machen das, led by Annika Reich, and she's actually helping people from Middle East, not only from Syria, but also from Afghanistan, and there are some also African artists involved. And I had a chance to work with some of them, and right now There will be in How in Berlin a performance by a Syrian colleague, and I mean, and I did the project 2 years ago in Gorky with some playwrights from Ukraine and Belarusia. So there is always this. I mean, it's strange what you ask, because I never thought that I should do this. This is very strange. I never thought that I should live my life as an artist who experienced war. So I think this is just it is the experience, but I think that really I think that it's very dangerous to departmentalize theater that deals with the conflict, because then it becomes this kind of this dark, that we have it somewhere in the dark corner, which I think that's tricky. And then I think we should deal with this. I don't have an answer, but I think we should deal with this in some other way, because whatever people are having as their experiences, I mean, in some way, it always concerns everybody. I have a feeling, because it's human experience as such. And so even if we didn't experience maybe a certain pain or a certain conflict that in our families, nevertheless we watch movies, we go to the theater, we listen to music, and we deal with pain of the others. So I think it's not necessary that I sit with somebody from Syria and that we compare, or that we do something with our traumas or memories. I think it's much more productive if if we just bring whatever we have with us at the table, and then we do something with it.
That's interesting. I will let others speak, but I also, from my perspective, I see that there are many transversal connections and affinities without being named like that. Once you go, you come from a war zone, and once you went through that trauma, it's really easier to enter communication with other people who are experiencing it now or recently and so on, but maybe I think it's structural, so that's how I would define it. So, but maybe others can give some concrete examples or think they shouldn't, I don't know.
I mean, just to say that from our perspective, or from my own perspective in Kosovo, I remember that after the war, there was an invasion of the international theater makers coming to do workshops and trainings, like trainings in everything. And then there was some kind of workshopization of the life there. So everybody was coming to do workshops, and for us, it was fine to, enter into kind of dialogue and exchange, because we didn't have any other alternative. But I think really we should be careful when we kind of enter into this kind of dialogue and cooperation with war zones. I think the initiatives should come from them. They should dictate the topics, they should dictate the agendas, they should dictate the format, because until recently, in any cooperation we did, or co-production we did, mostly until recently, I would say, until maybe 10 years, those who had the money, they were dictating the topic and the format, and also kind of guiding the project. It took us some time to get some sort of power in order to present ourselves equal. Like, okay, you have the money, but if you want to do the cooperation with us, then you have to treat us equally, and then we have to kind of set a ground in which we communicate equally as a theater makers, no matter where the money is coming.
I just wanted to say that, correct me if I'm wrong, yeah? What is your feeling? But in the war in Yugoslavia, like, it came as a surprise. Retroactively, of course, you can analyze many things and the processes and so on. But for the sake of what I wanted to say, it came somehow as a surprise. Starting in Slovenia, I learned about it from a friend of mine who had a car class, and he told me, hey, you know that the war started. What do you mean? The city was basically totally blocked and there were tanks and so on. So the shock of this and then how it developed and so on. But what I wanted to say is, to me, like what I see now, what is going on, this massive militarization of the part of the world where we live, European Union and so on, and the discourse and the narrative that it's good, actually, and that's the way how we will save peace and so on, gives me more base to think that we are in war. It's just the question of how this will manifest, much more than back then. Yeah? And excuse me on my naivety, because I think there are so many things that we don't see now, even if they are presented to us, even if we can have access to social media information and so on. But it's, for me, like total mystery how easy we accept it. And when I say we, it's a public discourse in real politics and mainstream media and so on, this militarization, when every single example from the history tell us this will end as a horror. There is no way when you have this massive re-weaponized industry that this brings to better things than what we have now. I don't want to finish this pessimistic, but yeah, kind of take more responsibility. I don't know how to scream, to close theater, to open theaters, to, I don't know what to do. I, at the end, quote just my 5-year-old son who said, but they can, about the weaponization and so on, but they can produce something else in those factories, and then we will not have war. If they don't produce weapon anymore, we will not have wars anymore.
Thank you. Nika, did you also want to say something, or shall we leave on this factory mass production of something else, or how do you feel?
Just, you know, like I of course, always the kids are right, you know, like, and that's the problem, that the most often the 5-year-old kids sees things much better than us, because we accept reality of the societies as something normal, even when those things are not normal. In that sense, I would concerning the question, you know, I would say that for us as the festival from Sarajevo, with the experience that we had, that it was very important that few years ago we opened the festival with a performance which came from Ukraine, that year before, after we opened with the Freedom Theater from Jenin, and this year that we had a group of citizens who are reading the names of killed kids in Gaza last 87 weeks. I just wish to say that for me, the important thing, you know, even that Bosnia is not member of European Union, you know, but we still feel as in this cultural sense part of the Europe. I think that one of the very important things is to stop this, you know, like narrow view of the world, because it's much bigger than the Western Europe and Western world, and that we should be more interested into the destinies of the people of Congo, Sudan, Palestine, you know, people who are same like us and who have totally different lives. And I think that our responsibility as a people who works in still pretty good conditions is to raise the voice against every form of colonialism and the stuff which will, you know, which will also affect our societies. At this very moment, there is more than 35 wars worldwide. So that's the reality of the world we live. So we can deny the fact that that we witnessed killing of more than like about 20,000 kids, you know. So if somebody believes that such a situation is something where we should be, you know, like ignore that, you know, like personally, I totally disagree with the world where in every part of this planet kids can be killed and that we are, you know, like ignorant about it. So for the beginning, I would believe that artists should be more focused on the kids and their idea of the world, because we as adults obviously failed into that mission.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much. You are a very brave audience. You are still with us. Thank you. These topics, they matter, and they're very difficult for everyone involved here to speak about and to listen about. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you, Katharina and the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung for this, for organizing this event. Now we can also invite you to the bar. The bar is open, so please help yourself. There is still a little refreshment, and all non-alcoholic drinks are on BPB. Thank you very much.